in the heart of a manicured suburban neighborhood, where the lawns were trimmed like buzz cuts and the trees stood like sentinels in perfect symmetry. There lived a woman named Karen who reigned over the homeowners association with a clipboard in one hand and a martyr's sigh in the other. Her eyes, sharp as thumbtacks, scanned the streets for any sign of deviation from the bylaws she held dear. I moved into this neighborhood seeking tranquility, a place to call home amidst the chaos of my profession. The house was unassuming, a modest two-story with fresh paint and a welcoming porch. It was my haven after long days of navigating the shadows. I parked my car, a nondescript sedan, the kind that blends into any setting like a chameleon on the street, perfectly parallel to the curb, as per the regulations. To Karen, the car was a foreign object disrupting her meticulously curated tableau. She saw it as a challenge, a puzzle piece that refused to fit into her preconceived order. Her first move was subtle. A note slipped under my windshield wiper. The script, neat and precise, it spoke of neighborhood aesthetics and communal harmony, veiled demands dressed as polite suggestions. I read her words with quiet amusement. There was no malice, only a determined obsession with control, a surveillance camera disguised as neighborly concern. I returned her note with a smile, an olive branch in the form of a wave as she watched from her window, peering through blinds like a detective of domestic deviance. For a while, peace reigned. I maintained my routine, a ghost in the daylight, retreating into the warm cocoon of my home. But Karen was not one to be easily deterred. Her vigilance was relentless, a lighthouse beam searching for imperfections. When she discovered a second note fluttering on my windshield, I could almost hear the exasperation in her silent admonition. This time, it was a reminder of bylaws and a veiled warning about enforcement actions. I pondered the nature of power, how it could be wielded so differently by two individuals. For Karen, it was a tool to impose order, a way to carve out a territory of influence in a world that often ignored her. For me, it was a quiet force, a whisper of strength that allowed me to remain unruffled in the face of rising tensions. Still, her persistence was admirable in a way, a testament to her dedication. I wondered, as I often did, what drove her to such lengths. Was it boredom wrapped in righteousness? Or perhaps a fear of irrelevance that she drowned out with rules and regulations? The mind is a curious thing, capable of constructing elaborate fortresses to defend against the unknown. Time unfurled like a slow-moving river, and I continued my silent dance with Karen. Each interaction was a brushstroke on the canvas of our shared existence, shaping the contours of an unspoken understanding, or so I thought. The morning came, sun spilling over the horizon like liquid gold. When I found my car missing, a phantom limb stolen in the early hours, in its place stood Karen, clipboard clutched like a shield, an air of victory about her. Her words, when they came, were few but potent, a revelation cloaked in irony and unintended consequence. The tow truck had been called, and my plain sedan had vanished into the ether. Little did she know, the car was more than it appeared. In seeking control, she had set in motion a series of events that would soon ripple through the fabric of her orderly world. The neighborhood basked in a deceptive stillness, like the calm surface of a lake, concealing turbulent currents beneath. I watched Karen's house from my window, a fortress of vinyl siding and perfectly manicured hedges, where the heart of the HOA's self-appointed enforcer resided. Her latest stunt with the tow truck had stirred something, a subtle undercurrent of defiance that wound through our quiet streets. Karen's crusade had taken on new vigor. Absurd regulations, like weeds, sprouted across our community, dandelions of discontent. They were rules only Karen seemed to find necessary. Garbage bins must be brought in by 7 a.m. on collection day. No holiday decorations before December 1st. Lawns mowed every Thursday. Failure to comply resulted in a citation slipped under the door. a paper-thin sword of Damocles that fluttered unbidden into our homes. She marched through the neighborhood like a tin-pot general, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning for infractions with the zeal of a hawk hunting its prey. Her authority, self-bestowed, was fragile, yet wielded with alarming fervor. The neighbors, reluctant soldiers in her campaign, nodded and acquiesced, whispering complaints behind closed doors. Gossip spread with the nimbleness of a shadow at dusk, twisting and curling through the air, intangible, yet pervasive. Rumors that Karen had her sights set on something more than just a well-kept neighborhood, a seat on the city council, perhaps, or maybe an ambition even grander, hidden beneath layers of suburban propriety. The tow truck incident was the catalyst, a whispered legend that grew with each retelling. Speculation brewed like storm clouds, dark and full of promise. The whispers grew louder, yet Karen seemed oblivious to the undercurrent she had unleashed, or perhaps she thrived on the tension, feeding off it like some mythical beast. It was ironic. Really, her quest for control had sowed seeds of disorder, a rebellion of subtle acts an extra day before bringing in the bins. A rogue pumpkin on a porch in November, grass an inch too long, acts of defiance hidden in plain sight, everyday rebellions against her growing tyranny. Karen's latest machination arrived in the form of a glossy newsletter, delivered with the crisp efficiency of a government decree. New regulations, more restrictions, a tightening grip. But the newsletter, instead of instilling compliance, was met with smirks and eye rolls, like a poorly executed magic trick. The neighborhood had grown weary of her antics. Like an old coat too worn to keep the chill at bay, underneath the veneer of compliance, a quiet revolution simmered. It was only a matter of time before it boiled over. From my window, I watched as Karen, unaware of the FBI's interest in her recent tow, continued her rounds. Her shadow stretched long and thin in the afternoon sun, a specter haunting our quaint little enclave. And as I stood there, watching her move from house to house with the determination of an artist perfecting her masterpiece of absurdity, I couldn't help but smile. The irony was delectable, unbeknownst to her. The FBI car she had so eagerly towed had set more than just a series of unfortunate events in motion. It had planted the seeds of change. The neighborhood, once a bastion of Karen's vision of order, was awakening, and somewhere, deep within, she must have sensed it too, the inevitability of a reckoning, lurking just beneath the surface. My shadow stretched across the kitchen floor, a silent witness to the chaos brewing outside my window. I stood by the counter, sipping my coffee, as the tow truck's growl reverberated through the neighborhood. The morning sun glinted off its metallic surface like a predator circling its prey. Karen, with her clipboard and pretentious airs, orchestrated the scene with the precision of a conductor leading a symphony. Her eyes were hawkish, zeroed in on my car as if it were an affront to her existence. The irony was palpable, as thick and bitter as the espresso in my cup. The car she sought to eliminate, the one she deemed an eyesore, was far from ordinary. Its understated appearance belied the significance of its presence. Karen, in her quest for conformity, had inadvertently stumbled into something much larger than her suburban fiefdom. The letters FBI, emblazoned on the concealed identification plate, were a silent testament to the unfolding drama she could not comprehend. I documented everything. My phone captured the scene from behind the blinds, a digital chronicle of Karen's overreach. Each photo, each second of video, was a brushstroke in the painting of her self-destruction. I had become an archivist of her folly, capturing her descent into absurdity for posterity. Karen moved like a storm, her fingers jabbing at the air, directing the tow truck operator with the fervor of a zealot. Her voice, shrill and commanding, cut through the morning's serenity. The operator wore a mask of indifference, following her commands with the mechanical obedience of a puppet on strings. Yet, Beneath that facade, I saw a flicker of awareness, a suggestion that he sensed the storm clouds gathering. As the truck's crane lifted my car, I thought about the quiet power of inevitability. Nature had a way of balancing itself, of ensuring that those who sow chaos eventually reap the whirlwind. Karen was oblivious to the silent dance of fate playing out under her nose. Her kingdom of neatly trimmed lawns and white picket fences was as fragile as a porcelain doll, and she was about to learn that lesson the hard way. I prepared my counter silently, like a chess player contemplating the board. Each move was calculated, each step deliberate. I reached out to the contacts who operated in the shadows, those who understood the significance of the vehicle she had so carelessly targeted. An email here, a phone call there, and the pieces began to align themselves. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was simply allowing the universe to correct itself. Karen's actions had initiated a ripple, and I was merely guiding it to its rightful conclusion. In the quiet of my living room, I imagined the dominoes falling, each one knocking the next in a cascade that would end at her doorstep. When the car was finally secured, Karen stood triumphantly, basking in the perceived victory. But triumph, like a mirage, is often deceptive. She had locked her sights on eliminating a nuisance, yet in doing so, she had opened a door she could never close. The tow truck lumbered down the street, carrying with it the seeds of retribution. I watched it disappear around the corner and sipped my coffee, savoring the moment. Karen had yet to realize the magnitude of her error, the leviathan she had unwittingly unleashed. But soon, very soon, the winds would change, and her ordered world would tremble beneath the weight of her own hubris. In the distance, a siren wailed, an ominous note mingling with the morning birdsong. It was the sound of inevitability, the march of consequences that bore down on her with the patience of an incoming tide. As I stood in the quiet of my kitchen, a small smile tugged at the corners of my lips. Justice, like time, had a way of catching up with everyone, even a Karen. The morning after the tow truck incident, I slipped quietly out of bed, the soft light of dawn filtering through the blinds. The world felt calm, a sharp contrast to the chaos swirling in my mind. Downstairs, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee grounded me, each sip a small ritual of focus and intent. I needed it, for today wasn't just any day. Today was the day I would settle the score with Karen in the most understated way possible. I sat at the kitchen table, the surface cold beneath my palms, and reviewed the dossier, legal papers, contracts, and a particularly interesting document from the FBI lay spread before me like a map to justice. The thought of the previous day's humiliation flickered briefly. Karen, with her arrogant smirk, her insistence that the rules were hers to bend and shape, but I willed myself to focus on the task at hand. The HOA had rules, yes, but they were brittle under the weight of federal implications. Karen's oversight was glaring, her arrogance her undoing. Her callous dismissal of what she presumed was merely a neighbor's car had set the gears of a much larger machine into motion. The irony was rich, almost intoxicating. She had crossed a line she didn't know existed, and now she would learn the cost of that ignorance. A quiet resolve settled over me as I dialed the number of the HOA's legal counsel. The phone pressed against my ear. I listened to the dial tone, each beep a countdown to that inevitable conversation. I laid out the situation with careful precision, detailing the breach of protocol and the potential legal repercussions. The lawyer's sharp intake of breath was audible, a clear recognition of the precarious position Karen had placed them all in. The wheels of justice, though slow, had begun turning. I imagined Karen, still oblivious, sipping her morning coffee, perhaps surveying the street from her window, confident in her perceived dominion. Her reign was about to encounter an unexpected storm. By mid-morning, The emails began to fly, a flurry of digital exchanges between the HOA board, the legal teams, and the local authorities. I could almost see the panic spreading, like ink blots on fine parchment. Karen's smug little empire was crumbling, brick by imperceptible brick. In moments like these, the universe has a way of righting itself, of restoring balance in the most unexpected ways. I thought of Karen, her sharp voice commanding respect through fear and intimidation. It was ironic, really. She'd spent so much time looking for transgressors that she failed to see the biggest one in her reflection. The day wore on with quiet intensity, the sun moving across the sky like the steady hands of justice. By late afternoon, I received the final confirmation the HOA had called an emergency meeting. Karen, of course, would be there. She would demand answers, assert her authority, but this time, her authority would carry the weight of an empty shell. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in soft hues of orange and pink, I felt a profound sense of calm. The world had righted itself, the balance restored. Karen's reign of terror, though rooted in fear and intimidation, could not withstand the quiet power of legal inevitability. I sipped the last of my coffee, savoring the warmth. There was an elegance to this resolution, a quiet retribution that spoke volumes without uttering a single word. Sometimes, the most powerful actions are those that need no audience. The sun had barely crested the horizon when the street whispered with the anticipation of what was to come. The tension clung to the air like morning fog, dense and nearly tangible. On this day, our quaint neighborhood, usually so composed, felt like a stage set for reckoning. The culmination of Karen's reign was imminent. The woman who had governed our lives through a tyranny of petty rules and ironclad bylaws had finally overstepped. Her latest misstep, involving my seemingly innocuous car, had unwittingly invited a storm she couldn't control. The vehicle she had so confidently had towed away belonged to the FBI, a fact revealed to her only after it was too late to retract her actions. From behind my lace curtains, I observed the scene outside, a collection of suited agents, their presence a stark contrast to our suburban blandness, gathered around Karen's driveway. Their dark cars were like sleek shadows pooling in the early light. Karen's pristine lawn, usually immaculate, seemed to wither under the weight of their presence. Watching her now, I noted how her hands fluttered like frantic birds, her authority crumbling like a sandcastle against the tide. Her power, once a fortress, was now just a paper facade in the face of real authority. The irony was almost poetic. Her voice, usually sharp and commanding, now stumbled, caught between explanations and excuses. It was a spectacle justice unfolding with a quiet dignity that words often fail to capture. Inside my home, a sense of calm washed over me, a tide of satisfaction after long months of her overbearing scrutiny. There was no need to gloat. Life has a way of balancing its scales, and today was proof of that. The neighborhood watched in silence, a collective holding of breath. We were marionettes freed from our strings, the final act playing out before us. The agent's movements were deliberate, orchestrated, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Karen's bravado had met its match, and she was found wanting. For once, the ever-watchful eyes of the community were not on me. I should have felt exposed. Yet there was a liberation in turning those prying gazes back onto her. For years, she had wielded her clipboard like a scepter, her throne, the head of every meeting, her voice drowning out dissent. Now, the silence around her was profound. As the scene played out, I reflected on the nature of power. Real power doesn't need to shout. It moves quietly, like a river carving through stone, patient and relentless. Karen had mistaken her position for influence, her rules for respect. But genuine authority comes from understanding and listening, qualities she had never mastered. Eventually, the agents departed with a stoic efficiency, leaving behind a neighborhood still vibrating from their presence. Karen, too, retreated, her veneer of control shattered. The community began to stir, conversations bubbling up in soft murmurs, like birdsong after a storm. The balance had shifted. The air was lighter, sweeter. A sense of renewal was palpable, like spring teasing its way through winter's grasp. Karen would remain a part of our neighborhood, but her dominion was no more. Her role, once central, was now peripheral, a jester sidelined by her own folly. Stepping outside, I felt the warmth of the sun for the first time in months, untainted by the shadow of her scrutiny. It was a new day, a chance to rebuild, to reclaim the community spirit she had so thoroughly stifled. A small voice inside me whispered that we should thank her. Without her overreach, the reckoning might never have come. But for now, gratitude could wait. The neighborhood was ours once again, and that was enough.